Thank you, Susan. If we get Ruhama and Christina, we would have a quorum. Is that correct? That would be 6, right?
1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. And I expect Christina tonight. So
I texted Ruhama and Christina. I don't have a reply back yet.
Hello.
I spoke with Ruhama. She said she'll be joining us in 5 minutes. I think so. Let's call the meeting to order at 6:39, and let the record reflect that present is the Ty McKinney, Robin Gaster, Christy Daphnis from the members of the PAC, and our ex officio members, Captain Satinsky and Sergeant Kate Brewer, and our visitor, Heidi Rhodes. Thank you. The first item will be the approval of minutes. Before we vote on it, I noticed that it is my impression that Councilmember Lutke's name is misspelled in a couple of places. I believe that I believe it's spelled Luedtke, and I think it's been misspelled in a number of places, and obviously that should be corrected. Did other people have any other concerns or observations regarding the minutes of the June 12 meeting? Logan, if you were the author, thank you very much. It was a good job. I mean, very comprehensive and good job.
And I'll make sure we make those spelling changes.
Okay, we'll wait until Christina joins us and Ruhama. I'm going to try calling Christina, even though I've sent her a text.
Susan, can I ask you one more legal question?
presumably we need a quorum in order to vote on anything.
Yes.
This is obvious. However, presumably we can discuss things
Oh, absolutely.
before we have a quorum. So
Mhm.
we don't actually have to wait to start the meeting, Eric. We can just, we can start. I see Ruhama has just joined us.
And Christina's joining.
Joining. Okay, so
Good.
Hi, Ruhama, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, welcome. Christina, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. So we now have 6 members present, which constitutes a quorum. So we are ready to proceed. Thank you both for joining us this evening. The first matter will be the adoption of the minutes. Is there a motion to adopt the minutes as corrected regarding the spelling of council members' names? I see Robin has
yeah,
moved.
I'll make a motion.
Robin has moved and
I'll second it.
Christie is second. Any discussion of the minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, or raise
Aye.
your hand.
Aye. Aye.
That's, and any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. Thank you, Logan, again, for a good job on that. Developing our annual report. And I had shared a memo earlier this evening suggesting that we also think about preparing a final report, anticipating that it is probable that that if there is that there'll be a successor agency or successor entity, it will not probably be called Policing Advisory Commission simply because of the 3 letters are too similar to the Police Accountability Board. Christina, did you wish to speak about the development of annual report? I see your hand.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was from earlier.
Okay. Are there thoughts then that folks have about our reporting? Robin, did you raise your hand? I couldn't tell if like it was a sort of a little quick.
No, I don't have any thoughts. I do wonder if we're going to do, I mean, look, I know we're supposed to do an annual report, but I don't think we want to spend the remainder of our time just writing reports. And I do wonder if we're going to do a final report, which will come this calendar year, right? I mean, we will deliver it whenever it's done, which will be this calendar year sometime. Why don't we just call that the annual and final report and be done with it? And then we don't have to do 2 reports.
Well, it is, first of all, I mean, it is it's our statutory obligation to write an annual report, and we failed to do that in the 3rd year. In this, let's see, we did one we failed to do it in 2022.
Have we provided one since in this year?
No, we've not.
Okay, so we're 1.5 years behind is what you're saying. Sort of.
Well, they're not due the calendar basis. They're due in July. That's when the annual report is due, at the end of July.
All right. Okay.
So, my thought would be that we would write to the council, say that our annual report for 2023 will be in the form of a final report, so that we would not be writing, you know, a second report as such for this year. But it does, but that has been a complaint of Sidney Katz, Councilmember Katz and Councilmember Lookie that we did not comply with the requirement of an annual report. So my thinking was that in a final report that we would certainly ask all the members of the commission currently and our former members if they had ideas for what they wanted to say, that how would they, to be able to describe their service, their accomplishments, perhaps our frustrations, recommendations to a successor body, recommendations to council about how, based upon the experience of service on the PAC, recommendations perhaps to the MCPD that have not been made. I see Vice Chair seeking recognition. Ty, you're recognized. Can't hear you, Ty.
Yeah, you're muted.
We still can't hear you.
You're still muted, Ty. You look muted.
We're not able to hear you.
You didn't mute him by accident, Eric, or somebody.
I don't have that capacity. I see, Ty, there is a red mark on your microphone, on your image.
There you go. Still can't hear you.
There's no red mark, but your audio is not coming through.
I think he's writing something on a notepad that, and then he's put it. There it is. Tech problems. Change computers.
Okay.
Excellent. All right, we got it.
All right. So we'll wait for you to come back and rejoin us, Ty. Is there anything else that anybody wants to say at this point about the annual report, or a final report? In the materials that Susan shared with us, she included a summary that Logan had written earlier this spring that was sort of the beginning of an outline of what was styled as a final report, which we're grateful for. What are folks' thoughts about, Christy?
I think we could certainly combine the two. You could have one section up front that says this is what we've done most recently, and by the way, here's our final report. I don't think it has to be like two separate documents.
Okay.
It's just a matter of timing, though, isn't it? I mean, we're late from the last one. The next one's due in July. A final report would presumably come towards the end of the 6-month extension so that we have time to finish it up. I mean, I'm totally with you. I don't want to write any more reports than that. Absolutely necessary.
I'll tell you what, let me see if I can write a minimal annual report with the notation that we are preparing a final report.
That sounds like
Susan, I'll work with you and Logan on that so that we try to have something in the next 10 days. And we perhaps, I don't know if we're able to schedule a special meeting for the purpose of adopting an annual report and spend 15 or 20 minutes. That might be appropriate to try to show the council that we take that responsibility seriously. Is that going to be problematic as long as we give proper notice?
You can always schedule a special meeting. I would just be cautious in that it is summer and I'm sure a lot of people are taking scheduled vacations. So,
of course.
Yeah.
Of course. And
maybe we can, Eric, maybe you can circulate a doodle poll.
Sure, of course.
So that we can figure out who's available when, and we've got at least a quorum to discuss it.
Okay. Okay. Good. Any other, let's see, we don't have, I know Ty had some thoughts. He's not with us. We'll take his thoughts on this when he joins us, but let's move ahead. We have a choice. We can either take up right now a letter regarding Bill 1223, the STEP Act, or we could take up body worn cameras and Christina's presentation, which is we've been waiting for some time, and we're really glad that we're going to be able to do it. Well, anybody have a preference?
I vote for the body cameras.
Okay. I see Christina's having camera trouble.
Okay, then maybe.
Hold,
All right. You can hear me
we
though,
can
right?
hear you, Christina.
Okay. So I guess I'm gonna ask, what am I supposed to be presenting? This is my first go around on doing this. And then what is the I guess I can tell you where we are. That's what I'm doing.
Yes.
All right. So we have a pretty fleshed out draft to present to the council and to the department with several categories. Let me pull it back up here. I apologize. Yeah, there it is. Okay. It's pulling up. Of course, it's going slow as possible, but we have several categories, specifically 3 categories set of questions. And we needed to add some things that Susan pointed out to us to kind of give context to the memo. And so right now, the only step left really is to fill in some informational things to this document. And get one final look at it, and then we'll have it to, I guess, I don't know if we're able to vote on it now that we have quorum tonight though. But it doesn't have the last pieces that I got today that I need to fill in. So it's still kind of in a draft stage. So we may need to do at the same meeting that we do the annual report voting special meeting, maybe we can vote for this then as well. I can share the document with everyone on the screen. I don't know how you'd like me to do it. What should I do?
Let's see, well, I think my suggestion is what feels best for you in terms of presenting it. I mean, if you want to
Okay.
put it up on the screen for screen share,
Yes.
that would be fine.
Okay. I'm going to share my screen.
While she's doing that, can everyone hear me now?
Yes.
Ty, we can hear you now.
Okay, all right, great, fantastic.
Should we pause to have the comments and then come back to this? Then I can pull it up, or?
Ty, we were was there something you wanted to say regarding the annual report? While you were gone, essentially what we talked about was that I would draft a kind of a minimal annual report for 2023, but the guts of our work would be to prepare a final report, that we would have a special meeting that we try for like 15 or 20 minutes just to sort of deal with the question of the annual report before as soon as possible, and that would be something I would try to take up the writing a draft of.
Okay, I was responding to what Susan had placed in the chat. I was curious was she indicating that we were due for 2 reports, or simply for the report from 2022, 2023?
the PAC did not submit a report last year that it needed to support, and I believe that Logan's draft or his skeletal framework for a report this year would include everything that the PAC has done over the past 2 years. Just kind of kill two birds with one stone.
Okay. All right, well, that answers my question. And then the second thing was, and I think you're alluding to that now in terms of how you're gonna craft a final report. And I guess the only comment I had regarding that was, are we gonna do a final report for this year and also a report with recommendations, or do you all think that it's best to combine those?
So what I was thinking was that the annual report would be sort of, there's a template or format in terms of describing a number of elements, and that we would meet those elements. My idea was that a final report would be a final report of this commission, anticipating that this commission, as currently constituted, is not going to exist by January, that there's going to be a new entity, and whether or not some of us are asked by the council to serve on that or not, none of us can predict that at this point. So that my idea was we would comply with our statutory obligation to have an annual report, but that we would put the work into a final report, which would include recommendations and broader observations, and part recommendations for the question of how should a oversight body like ours be constructed, empowered, supported, what issue, what should it be, how should its responsibilities be perhaps more precisely defined. Those would be some of the things that I would imagine that would be useful in a final report from us.
Okay. All right, thank you. Got it.
So, Christina,
Yes.
thank you for that interruption. Are you able to share your document using the screen share?
I am not. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. Probably for good reason, I imagine.
No, that's interesting because on my side it says anybody can, but let me try again. Or I can share it if you want me to.
Okay, all I did was implant the bill synopsis you sent. That's the only
Oh,
change from
okay.
the last. Here it is.
Susan, thanks very much.
Thank you. All right. So what you will see on the final document at the top will be a bill synopsis that has been so artfully provided by Susan. And it just outlines the bill that's informing these questions. The questions for the checks and balances is just to make sure that we have someone, that the two officers that we learned of in the first presentation from the department aren't the only two officers, so to speak. Like there's some sort of rotation happening because there is an innate bias that everybody will have. So if you have the same 2 or 4 eyes on certain things, I think there's a greater chance of bias there. So we want to address that to see what their plan is, if there's something in place. And a lot of these questions, I believe, are presented in a way, and what I'm thinking we want to go from this perspective, and of course this involves you all's input, is to kind of get the wheels turning on the things and gaps that may be existing in the processes and procedures that they are putting into place currently. Although they are in the process of updating their policy right now, it's still, that to me feels like the best time anyway, so that they don't have to do this twice if some of these questions are things that may have not been brought to their awareness. So a lot of that's the kind of energy that I'm hoping this is giving, not so much questioning the actions of the department or the council or anything, more so making sure that that what they're asking for is being done in a way that is fair. So The other section, so that's the first section. I hope you all have had an opportunity to kind of read through those questions. Are there any input from anyone regarding those questions or? And I have
I guess,
a copy open to edit at the same time.
I do have one question. My understanding was that the department had assigned 2 specific officers to do this, that it wasn't kind of a rotational thing, that it was two, I believe it was sergeants who were specifically tasked to do this work. Perhaps we could clarify that.
Yes, that is the understanding, and that is also the concern.
Mhm.
And so it is more of a style of presenting this as opposed to, like, we are all aware that that's how they have it set up now.
I
But the
guess.
style of presenting the question is to not sound as if we're questioning.
Okay.
I think it's still, but as we go through each of those questions, I think it identifies that this is a concern because of the fact that it's the same 2 officers.
And to be honest, the evidence from moderation work in social media is that this kind of work causes burnout. I mean,
Right.
I can imagine that going through camera footage, especially random camera footage, when mostly there is nothing to report, would be a serious problem for those officers, and it wouldn't take long either.
That's a good point. And do you think that it would have a place in this document?
Yeah, I
To
think
address?
has MCPD or the council, whoever, considered the mental health impact on the officers doing the review, of being stuck in a room doing this review endlessly?
Great, excellent. I appreciate that. That's great.
Yeah.
All right.
no, Thank you. That was a good point. And so, Christina, you'd asked the question of what's the scope of the document. The scope of the document would be, from my perspective, any ideas or observations that occur to us about what our understanding is of how MCPD is doing this, and any knowledge that we may have about best practices or problems from other agencies or analogous kinds of things such as social media moderation that Robin just referred to. When you said it is without a doubt that a margin of bias of error will occur when discretion is afforded, it strikes me that there's something tautological about that, in that there's a margin of bias that occurs no matter who or how many people might do this. And I'm not sure, maybe, I mean, so the other kind of thing that occurs to me is that there is the question perhaps of bias, but there's also the question of sort of, and so bias can be understood, bias toward an officer or against an officer, or bias in favor of a particular technique or against a certain technique, or bias on a racial or ethnic basis. That I'm not, the use of the word bias doesn't, for me, clarify what the concern is. I mean, ostensibly, there is an articulated standard that the officers are reviewing against. So, I mean, a key question is, how did the standard get developed about, and that's probably simply the department's policies. And so do the department's policies need to be in any way translated into some other format? You know, is there, you know, should they be sort of put together in a sort of a checklist form that as I'm reviewing this interaction, I'm reviewing 20 or 30 or 50 or however many items on my checklist to make sure that the policy is being followed? So that,
I think that's too mechanical, Eric. I mean, policing is a, you know, it's a somewhat intuitive activity, and I can't see having these officers sitting there trying to go through a checklist of 20 items for every video. That just seems
okay,
overly burdensome.
well, I mean, so, I mean, it's let's assume that it's burdensome. You've already established it can be burdensome in a burnout context.
Yeah.
Then, so the question that is raised in here by Christina's discussion is the use of discretion. So it's the discretion of the one or two sergeants, or is it and so the concern here is, what are the, in the face of even of the intuitive character of policing, what is the outer limit of this, of the exercise of discretion that warrants, you know, further review? Or should there be, I mean, I'm you know, in other words, obviously, in some sense, when a recording is referred to IAD by these sergeants, this is not the end of it. It's really the beginning of sort of a more focused sort of review.
Yeah.
And so, I guess the question, you know, is this a kind of do we think of this as a kind of preliminary screen in which the judgment should be, well, if it's questionable, I should refer it to IAD, or unless it's egregious, I don't refer it to IAD.
Ty is trying to.
So I'll leave those comments there and recognize Vice Chair McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think one of the things that we used to do when I did investigations, review of information we received, it was not body-worn cameras, but it was written information. And what we used to do is basically look at it and deal with it from the perspective of keywords of language that was being used to warrant any additional scrutiny of whatever we receive. And if we're going to do this or recommend it, then it's going to have to be done in a very limited basis. I agree with the perspective that it can become very tedious, but at the same time, as there has to be some minimal requirements that would be consistent no matter who reviewed the information, the body-worn cameras. Because if there's no consistent things that need to be checked off on, I mean, it could be 2 or 3 things specifically. Language, it could be any kind of violence or something like that that is witnessed on camera, whatever the case may be. But there has to be some standard that is universal no matter whom is viewing the body-worn camera footage.
Chris, if I can ask Christina something, right on that point, Ty.
Robin, you go ahead.
Right. But, in the next paragraph, you say, are there strict standards outside of the required instances? Does that imply that there are already in place specific instances that require that something be referred to IAD?
Yes, if you could, Susan, scroll down a little. So these categories are here. These all have to be investigated by IAD. And so I want to kind of clarify, because I don't find it very clear. If the officers are also getting filtered these required categories. What a waste of time, right? So, or are they being indexed or categorized in a way that those are streamlined directly to IAD, and the only footage that these officers are reviewing are things outside of these categories? And then to go back to what I'm sorry, was it Ty that just said this about making sure there's a uniform, like a universal standard, no matter what, that is being placed against those that other footage? What categories do they fall under? And then I wanted to just speak to one thing that Eric said about the bias. The bias here also is that even if they're looking from, the officer's looking from one lens, by the time they get to the 100th video, I'm certain there's probably some sort of evidence of this, that this is what happens to the human mind, but they're going to start comparing those videos worse or lesser or better or more awful or against each other. And so there's a concern of that as the pool of these videos get deeper and deeper and larger, the comparisons, well, that wasn't that bad compared to what that officer did yesterday, kind of thing. It just seems very scattered. And so that's what we're trying to hone in. But these are the categories. So that's the bias that I think is one that even if a completely unbiased person, if that person exists in the world, if we want to believe that there's a completely unbiased way to look at anything, even if that's the case, a bias is going to develop as they review more footage. That's an opinion, obviously. So I hope I answered your question, Robin, and responded to Eric's concern about the bias.
Yes and no. Yes, you did. You did an excellent job of answering my question. But I think this, as I understand it, if there are questions about the officer's actions that come up outside of this random process, then somebody will go look at the body-worn camera, and then the normal process of determining whether IAD should be involved will continue, right? So if there's a complaint or another officer makes a complaint, but basically it's a complaint-based process, if that happens, then this random analysis is not involved at all, right? This document, as I understand it, is only about the random part of the body camera business. Is that right?
That is correct. And so we don't discuss, in this document, it's not speaking to complaints
Exactly.
based
Right.
viewings. There just needs to be a distinction that isn't available now in the documents that inform this document of what happens to the footage or the recordings that fall under these categories. So in their policy, it straight says these all have to be investigated by IAD, but it doesn't necessarily say how that happens. Is there something that each officer themselves, do they index and categorize their own footage? How is that happening? And once that happens, it's fed into what for it to be sampled? And are these videos, this footage that falls, I'm pointing as if you can see me, are the footage that's within these categories still funneled into that universe of the larger sample? You see what I'm saying? Like, so that's what we're trying to, because part of this is to speak to what you're speaking to, Robin, the burdensome part of it. And if we can filter through some of these things, there's no need for these videos these pieces of footage that fall in these categories to be part of the sample universe that they're pulling the subset from.
I thought the sample universe was the universe of all video collected from body cameras, period. End of discussion. It's going to be everything.
And that is what we're trying to distinguish. Because I'm speaking as if you all agree with me, so please disagree if you do. What we hope is that they'll say this, they'll revisit this, and they do need a more savvy system if their system isn't able to do this. If they do not have this in place in a way that it is not worth doing, if it's going to create prejudices and biases. And so if it's unable to, if they're not approaching it in a way that can eliminate that to the best of any ability on any level of anything of this sort, then we have a problem, right? We can't just say, okay, oh, well, that's too hard to do. It's too hard to do it right. So we're just going to do it wrong because we need something, right? That's not good enough for me.
Mhm.
So yes, it does sound like, okay, if they are not already indexing and categorizing this footage in a way that the universe does not hold, the universe where the subset sample is coming from does not hold these already going straight to IAD footage, then there needs to be a revisit as to what they're using to piece together their sample. Am I making sense what I'm saying? The universal sample should not, in my opinion, include any of the footage that goes directly to IAD. In order for that to not happen, we need to know, or we don't need to, they need to have the footage should be categorized or indexed or some way that it's able to be pulled out. So does that mean that officers are self-identifying that they had use of force? And so that piece of footage is no longer uploaded into the universal sample set. If we have two entities looking at, it's already going to IAD, and then you have these two officers have to look at this video that's already going to IAD, it makes no sense. There's no logic there. So it sounds like, but I imagine that it's going exactly as you have suggested, Robin, where it's an entire universe of all footage, right?
Yeah.
And that to me is the wrong answer.
Kate may be able to answer many of these questions.
Kate had signaled that she's also monitoring another meeting this evening. She's,
I can step out and answer whenever you guys are ready. I can answer probably a lot of these questions, and some of these questions could be clarified by reviewing our body-worn camera directive, which is on the internet as well. But let me know when you guys are ready. I can probably address some of these.
if you've been following us, Kate, this might be a perfect moment to help us. I see Ty's hand. Did you want to?
No,
Ty,
no,
did you-
Eric, what I want to do is, if Kate is ready, I would like to hear what she has to say, and then I may have some comments.
Thank you. Kate, if you're able to help clarify the existing procedure, I think that would improve our conversation.
So yeah, no problem. So I don't have the directive right in front of me, but there are no automatics. So there's nothing that automatically goes to IAD. However, they're classified by the event that I'm there for, so the crime. Also tagged if there's a use of force. So any use of force has to be reviewed by every single person among the chain, right? So as a sergeant, I have to review all the body-worn camera footage from a use of force. If I see something, then I send it up to IAD. If I don't catch it, a lieutenant has to review it, same thing, captain, so on and so forth, right? So there's those checks and balances as far as those go when we're talking about use of force. There is an automatic system set up where it automatically categorizes certain calls based on the way we clear them on the radio. It's not 100% perfect, but and we basically the process is that we tell officers to go, and when they download or upload their body-worn camera, which is also the way that it's charged, so it has to automatically be downloaded, uploaded. I'm not sure the right phrase. Those, I guess it would be uploaded, because those videos then get uploaded, is to tag the videos. Now you can tag them throughout your shift as well, and it's very easy to tag them. You can tag them in your vehicle because we can hook them up to a computer right then and there. So when I clear a call, I can provide the appropriate call, type of call that I was on. And then there's those are all tagged in that way. Now, one thing that's being said, and I agree with it, saying that, you know, sitting in a room looking at videos can be burnout. And I just asked the committee to understand that's the reality of what we do, right? Like, this whole profession involves burnout. So don't think for a second that the officers that respond to these DOA calls, to these homicides, to these shootings, to these child-involved crimes don't experience burnout. That's universal, regardless of where you're assigned. So while I agree with what everybody's saying, it creates a bias, and yes, you could be burned out by looking, and yes, there are some things that do happen with the brain where inevitably, because it's just human nature, you're going to compare one to the other. That's just human nature. It's not anything, you have to be aware of it. You have to make sure you're not doing that, but it's really hard to forget something that you've seen already. It's damn near impossible, right? When you're looking at the next video and so on and so forth. So I do understand that. However, those can be suggestions, but how would we as a department, and I don't know the answer to this, do we train every supervisor to have to do a certain time frame in reviewing these body worn cameras? Does that alleviate the issue? I don't know. So, but that would have to be training 120, I believe, supervisors to spend how much time reviewing them. And then when you're pulling them from different locations, I just don't know what that would look like. But I understand what you guys are saying, like sitting and watching those videos over and over again can certainly create that bias. But just a couple of things, I think when you're looking at this, it's worth looking at the body worn camera directive as well, which is, or the function code, which is accessible on the county website. And then if you guys, I'm going to tie, so you might have.
Thank you, Kate. Did you want to, Kate, were you finished? Because
I'm sorry. Yeah, I know I said a lot. So if there's questions, I can, based on what I said, I can absolutely, I got a few minutes.
Sure. Well, that was helpful. Ty, did you, I'll let you go first, and then I see Robin's hand.
Okay, I missed a lot of what Kate said. I've been having computer difficulties, as you all know. So it really came in, very broken to me. But I think in this case, I think we're trying to make perfect that which we can't make perfect, because we have a human element involved here. And no matter which way we do it, we're always going to have the human element involved. And the human element brings with it its own biases. So we're not going to be able to ferret that out. I think probably what we're going to have to do is look at what we already have that goes to IAD pretty much automatically. And then we're going to have to rely on something that we should be able to rely on, and that is the integrity of the officers that are doing the review, because some of this stuff is simply, you know it when you see it kind of thing. It may not be specifically defined, but you know it when you see it that it is indeed wrong. And you have to rely to some extent, regardless of whom you have doing the review, that if they come across something that inherently they know is not quite right, that it would be reviewed and reported.
Okay, thank you. Robin, your hand was up.
Okay, so I'm not going to make myself very popular here. I think the PAC should seriously consider writing to the council and suggesting that the entire random review process should be abandoned. I think the random review process has no chance of being significantly effective and will be a substantial waste of resources. Look, every time there's a complaint, every time there's an issue, the supervisors go through the body-worn camera, right? So what we're really talking about here is random review of footage where there is no complaint. And we talked when Laurie was here last time, we talked at some length about the difficulties of doing any sort of statistically significant kind of analysis out of this. So, it's like sitting on a boat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean with a very small fishing fishing pole and saying, well, I guess we're going to catch a whale today. I mean, this is just not a smart way to go about it at all. The best way the reason for body cameras is so that there is evidence when there is a question of misconduct, and so that police officers have a record that there was no misconduct when there is complaint. The whole thing needs to be centered around complaint. I have no idea whose idea this random review was, but all of the work that Christina has done shows us how difficult it is to do it well, the burden it imposes on individual officers, the resource burden on the police department. Those sergeants could be off doing something else, inevitably more useful. I don't know. I just think that as a pack, we should be thinking out a little outside the box and say, you know, this is ludicrous. There, I'm not going to be popular, am I?
Well, I don't know. I don't know whether that's the criterion. It's a very useful insight, Robin. I mean, you know, I guess the Christina.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, Robin, I tend to agree with your perspective on this, because of your exact reasons. So I won't repeat those, but I guess the question becomes, what then are we leaving unanswered? Because this was an answer to some sort of call, right? And I don't think this was the correct answer. I just, like you said, it's just the more that we dig into the concerns, the more unspiraling it becomes. It just doesn't, and it doesn't feel, if something feels this uncomfortable, you know, there's something wrong with it. I don't like the idea of this randomization at all. I don't feel that there's a way to do this in a way that's fair. It's a completely unfair system. I would almost fathom to say, if I was in a position of choosing a new career and it was to be a police officer, if I was going to a department and this is part of their process, is to randomly review the cameras without any true systems in place that captures or guardrails against biases, I would be detoured, because it feels like luck of the draw, which is one of the things I say in this. It feels like maybe I'll get lucky and they'll pull the video or the footage that was great and I'll get some sort of recognition, or maybe I'll get really unlucky and they'll put, and of course, that sense to say, well, that person should be disciplined anyway. Okay, we all understand that to be the case, but that just leaves it to mean that on your unlucky day, you're the person that gets caught. I don't know. There's no way to say it that doesn't sound like we're letting video go or footage go that where they should be disciplined for. This isn't the way to capture that type of, to me, this is not the method to capture those missteps of officers. I don't see, and I just don't see how we're going to, how to do, because we do have a human factor here that Ty keeps pointing to, but in this document, I keep discussing how can we get away from this bias that's going to innately exist. And even off the last few comments that were made, it just sounds like there's just no way to avoid that. There's just no way. So, and for me, if there's no way to avoid it and we know it, then why are we doing it? If we know blatantly this is going to lead to prejudices, we know this ahead of time. Do we need to wait until someone gets, until the prejudice shows itself and then someone reacts to that? Or are we able to stop this from derailing now? So I agree with you. I tend to agree with you on this, Robin, just simply because I don't know if we're answering whatever the call was. This doesn't seem to be a suitable answer there, because this does not seem to be a suitable answer to almost anything. No disrespect to any efforts that were put in doing it, but this is part of the challenge when you're looking at something from a bird's eye view and you're on the outside. You can see these things are glaring. This is glaring and it's frightening, and it's a bumpy road. It's going to hit a head, and if there's a way to prevent that, then I would back it. I don't know how we present that to council. I don't know if there's a way to do that, or if we would, I don't know how that, and this is important in terms of like the refashioning of this commission anyway, right? Like, how are we to affect that?
Well, Christina, the way in which we communicate to the councils, we do write to them, and we've sent letters and memos of different kinds. And so it's not, you know, I mean, I understand that we haven't done it in a way that you've seen it being terribly transparent, but I wanted to give Ty a chance to then speak, and then Robin and if Kate had any further thoughts. But Ty, go ahead.
I don't know if we're in the process of saying here that letting the good be the enemy of the perfect. I think where we're left here, we're trying to create perfection when we may have to realize when something is sufficient enough. In other words, sufficient enough would be issues that come up on body-worn cameras that must be reported to IAD, et cetera, and then not concern ourselves with the others that do not fall into those specifically defined categories, because we're not going to root out all biased and different opinions about what people see on camera, because they're two officers could see the same thing and both have different interpretations of what they're seeing. So we're not going to be able to root that out. But is there, I guess my question is this, is there sufficient need for things as we have stated them here, things that should go to IAD, and let that be the be all end all, with the exception of what I said earlier, or situations where you know it as an officer when you see it, that it's something that deserves to be investigated further or to be reported. And you have to leave that up to the integrity of the officer. You're not going, because people are going to view that in a different way. So anyway, that's it.
Right. So Ty, I mean, essentially what I hear you saying is that in a random review, the reviewers are going to use that kind of intuitive sense in their review to try to find instances that are errors, whether just simply for training purposes or for more substantially. And the concern, and so the concern that sort of Robin is making is overall the investment of time in trying to do the review or set it up so that this review can take place isn't going to yield enough that will be valuable either as misconduct that needs to be further investigated, or simply errors that should get noted for purposes of retraining or and correction. And I guess a question would be, I see something has been put in the chat here from
It's just the origins of where.
oh, I see. Okay, very good. Heidi, thank you for posting this. And so it is, so council has had the idea, and so the department had to sort of implement it. And I don't know that I followed the debate on Bill 1821. I guess one question would be, of the reviewing that's been done so far, how many instances have been flagged by the reviewing sergeants for either retraining or any other purpose? I mean, that would be a question, at least, that in the carrying out of Bill 1821, that would be worth knowing. But Robin, well, Christina's hand is up, and then Robin. Christina?
Yes, I just want to clarify for the record as well. Like, this would be great if it was done in a way, the money would need to be spent to make this successful. That's the issue. Like, so there should be in my opinion, for it to work and work well, there should be a way that this is indexed and categorized in a way that will then lend to what Lori discussed, and having a statistical findings and dispositions at the end that hold meaning, right? So but without the money on the front end, where, for example, like if the camera footage is already not going directly to IAD and being sifted through all these other channels beforehand, I mean, why are they part of the universal sample that's part of this random sample? So let me clarify. I think that the idea and purpose of the bill is fine, so long as putting it into place is done correctly. And right now, it sounds like that has not happened because the software, I believe, even in the earlier conversations that we had in this commission, was the software was early on and it was still being tested and all of these things. So this is not a new idea, doing random samples of anything, right? Sampling things is always been done. There is cost associated with having a tool that will be able to do this in a way that will address these bias issues, because you can categorize, index, search out, sift, and do things of that nature, where your actions and your sampling are intentional sampling. So I don't know. So I just wanted to clarify that this isn't so, oh, there's a huge issue with the bill. There's an issue with the way in which it is being implemented. And the implementation, if that was to get on track and on target, which takes money, of course. So if that were to get on track, then I think a lot of these concerns could be eliminated. But technology could address a lot of this.
Christina, thank you. Robin?
Yeah, I'd like to pick up on what Christina just said. If I understand you correctly, Christina, what your complaint mirrors mine in one sense, that simply trolling through all of the body-worn camera footage is a waste of time. There just aren't enough fish in the sea, and you're inevitably going to get biased. You're not going to get statistically useful data out of it. So one question might be, maybe these officers should be reviewing very specific reports that police officers make already. So for example, there's a use of force report. You have to, as a police officer, you have to report when force is used. Maybe using these officers to review all use of force would be a useful tool. Rather than being random, how about you look at specific uses that don't otherwise involve IAD? And these are not all, these are by no means all IAD cases. They probably aren't. I mean, the vast majority of them aren't, but they are a use of force, and maybe that's an important place to put your emphasis. So that's one possibility, but I think the other one is really, Christina, I think this report could be presented to the council as a way of showing all the difficulties and unanswered questions related to the random review of body camera footage. And at the bottom of that, given all these questions, I think we could say, we don't think this is a good use of MCPD resources.
Captain Satinsky, I think perhaps could shed some light. I see your hand, Captain.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes, thank you.
Of course. Okay, good. Sorry, I'm driving through the mountains of Pennsylvania, so I'm losing the signal there. I want to address one thing that Dr. Gasser said there about people look at this right now in reference to use of force. Right now, anytime there's a use of force, there are several layers of review.
Yeah.
Man, that go through that body. Discussion about burnout and such, having that several layer differing approach versus only these two sergeants, I mean, that's going to cause even more burnout. That's just my take on that part of it. I think you get a much wider breadth on the review on that, because you have a sergeant. Let's say it's an officer, you would have a sergeant, then a lieutenant, then a captain or a director, and then their assistant chief before it goes out. So I mean, there are several layers, and I have been something and I send it back to the original sergeant to say you need to do X or Y, or I send it to internal affairs. That's how it goes. For varying things, or there's counseling, which is just done in-house. All those things are documented. When it comes to the programs, I agree with what Christine is saying about the programs. Well, body worn camera, while it has been around, the random review process is starting to gain this national hold, and programs have been built. Bill 1821 that the council put together had several debates about programs and all sorts of other things. And anyone on the council, I believe, Susan, you correct me if I'm wrong, all that stuff is still loaded into the county council system online where people can review all the testimony. While I didn't testify in it, I did participate in some of the research of it. These programs are out there. They're still somewhat in their infancy. We have reviewed some of these. I don't know at the moment right now if we've gone to the purchasing process, but if anyone's ever been involved in government purchasing, it is like geologic time. So it takes a while, and there are a lot of steps involved in that. So I don't know where we are in that. I do know we reviewed a few programs. I just don't know to what end. I can find out for the next meeting if you'd like.
Thank you, Captain. What strikes me is looking at the language that our friend Heidi Rhodes posted in the chat, is that the department must conduct periodic random reviews to, and it uses the word assess employee compliance with legal requirements and department policy, to assess employee performance, to assess consistency between employees' written reports and the recordings. So we don't know exactly what the nature of that assessment is or the purpose of that assessment. Is it supposed to be an assessment of a large statistical body to sort of, or is it a case by case? Because the problem with case by case is that you then get the exception with it beginning in line 37 that says, except when doing this random review, the department must not review the recordings without cause to discover acts of misconduct or instances of poor performance. So outside the random review, we can't use it that way. But in the context of random review, it does talk about employee performance as something to be, quote, assessed. So the language of it's in the context of this random review that this consistency and performance is supposed to be assessed in some way. And again, is it assessed case by case, assessed statistically? It certainly doesn't say, it's not clear in the text of the language itself. But I'm sorry I went on that point. Who was seeking recognition?
Oh, it was probably me. Look, there's nothing in there that says anything about statistical analysis.
Right.
So and the reality is that we can't do good statistical analysis on this data pool. I am quite prepared to testify to that. So, we're left in the end, in any case, with a fishing expedition, right? I mean, that's all this really is. And I take Christina's points about the impact on potential officers, and I take Captain Statinsky's point that, that there are multiple levels of review already for potential negative, but for complaints. I haven't changed my opinion at all. I think this is a total waste of time and resources, and we should say so. And I think Christina has documented brilliantly all of the detailed pitfalls that make it impossible to turn this into something useful. So, I think we have a great document here, which raises innumerable questions that the council obviously hadn't thought about when it was passing this bill. And we should just shine the light on it and just say, no, you did it wrong. You should change course.
Well, Robin, you make a strong case. Christy, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think a lot of people have made really good points about wanting to make sure that this is done in a way that, you know, isn't wasting time and resources. I'm really a little on the fence about what the right way to do that is. So I know I've been somewhat quiet because I'm trying to think through this and really think about, like, what is the best approach? Is it random? Is it, you know, everything that falls in a certain category? Is it some other approach? And I'm not really sure what the best approach might be. I do think that kind of narrowing the scope in some way to the types of incidents that we're hoping to prevent is maybe one way to approach this, but I don't know exactly what that would look like.
Thank you. Ruhama, if you've been able to follow this, do you have any thoughts? If you can't reply, Ruhama, that's okay. We understand. If you do have thoughts, we would welcome them. What I think, sort of given the hour, is that we hold over taking an action that at this point, but that we that if someone wanted to write the beginning of a short statement or sort of or modify this as more something that we might sharpen along the lines of what Robin is saying. I think obviously we'd want to make sure that, you know, Cherie and Vernon and Lori especially, you know, had an opportunity to sort of look at any action that we're proposing on this. But hopefully the minutes have captured this very rich discussion about the problems and with the legislation as much as with the department's attempt to implement it. And I think that's a very useful thing that we've done this evening, in moved from a critique of the department's policy to a more higher level critique of perhaps the mandate to the police in this instance. What if are there further comments that people want to make on body-worn cameras at this time before we move to new business? I'm going to propose that we postpone discussion of the STEP Act because it's not pressing. But was there anything else that folks wanted to say at this point regarding body-worn cameras before we table the discussion further? So thank you for this, Christina. Thank you very much for sort of helping surface this and laying the groundwork for what I think has been a very, very useful discussion for all of us to gain some, you know, some different insight into this. I'd like to now ask if there is new business to propose.
Yeah.
Robin.
Yes, I'd like to make a formal request to the police department, I believe that is the correct place, to provide us with detailed data about crime clearance rates, specifically crime clearance rates for at least the last 5 years, by type of crime as per the FBI major categories for crime. So that's how MCPD categorizes crime. So what I'd like to know, what I think we should know is, what are the trends in crime clearance rates by type of crime and by district. I think doing it by district is probably the best way. We could ask for more detailed data later if we want to, but we should have this data, because I think this is a really important outcome metric for the police department, and I don't think it is publicly available. I'm happy.
So, can I step in real quick? It's Jordan. Sorry, I couldn't get the thing.
Yeah.
So the type of crimes that we report to the UCR data is already available through the UCR database, which is publicly available and out there, as well as constructs on Data Montgomery. If you're looking for district and offenses, so like if you have a murder in the 3rd district, and was it closed by exception? Was it closed by arrest, or was it unfounded, or is it still open? I believe that set of data, I can research for you and let you know relatively quickly how easy that would be for us to get to you and compile.
Thank you. That would be, that's exactly what I was looking for. Yeah.
Okay. And if you make a formal request, I'm just going to tell you, this isn't going to be instant. So I know you guys have a 30-day thing. If you guys trust me enough to give me like a week or two just to try to figure it out, I might be able to do it even faster. And if it's going to be longer, I'll tell you, and I'll be very upfront. I just don't have the ability to do it at the moment.
Of course, Captain, thank you very much. I mean, we would be happy to rely on your informal effort to do that.
Okay.
I'm very interested in knowing more about maybe you and I might have a brief conversation at another time about the UCR database, because I was looking at the state reporting, which the most recent data is from 2021.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And what in part struck me was that there were enormous differences in the data on a county by county basis between what's reported in the UCR category versus the NIBRS category. So
I can explain that if you'd like.
Maybe rather than taking our time
Sure.
here, unless
Yeah.
it's relevant to Robin's specific request about clearances, I mean, would it be relevant to the question of clearance?
I mean, not to the relevant of clearance. NIBRS just captures more detailed offense data, not clearance data.
Right. So, Robin, would you be satisfied with Robin? Right. So, Captain, that would be very, very helpful. Is
Okay.
there? Good. Thank you. Is there other new business that did we want to consider the question of NALPROS rates, or is we going to put that off until we have better data?
Yeah, let's leave that for a little bit.
Okay. Good. Is there other new business that or concerns that people would want to raise? Okay, then let me we have just a couple minutes regarding the STEP Act. Robin, you drafted a proposed drafted. I wanted to at least recirculate that, perhaps with a few edits. But I think I really appreciate sort of your going forward with that, and following up on our last meeting. And so we will keep the STEP Act on our old business to continue when we convene again. Do folks believe that they will be available for a meeting in August? Is there the date in August would be right now the 14th.
It's, I would say, unlikely. I'll be in London. I'll be 5 hours ahead. So
right, so it'd be 11 o'clock at night when or 11:30 for 6:30 meeting.
maybe I'll say a maybe.
Christy?
That's August 14th.
That's the current date scheduled for the second Monday of August would be the 14th. I'm going to be arriving in an airplane, if it's on time, at 7:30. So I'll be in the air for at least the first part of that on the 14th. So it's really not feasible, I don't think, for me to be on the 14th. Should we do a doodle about about other dates, you know, in the second or third week of August as possibilities for an August meeting?
Yeah, that sounds great to me.
Anybody? Well, does Susan, do you know if that might be feasible? I mean, recognizing that you and your colleagues are going to be taking some well-deserved vacation time.
Yes, I'm off the week of the 21st. So if there's any availability to push it up a week to August 7th, and it doesn't have to be on a Monday, if everybody agrees, we just, especially if you're going to vary from the typical dates, we should try to advertise well in advance.
Yes. Okay. So we'll do a doodle for the August meeting. The night of August 7th, I will be in a place in California where I probably could participate at what would be 3:30 in the afternoon there. So that's probably feasible for me. So I'll send out a doodle on that, but I'm glad we raised the August question at this point rather than sort of suddenly confronting it several weeks from now. So anything else then that folks have any would like to bring up? Well, Christina, thank you very, very much for your work in sort of, preparing the memo, more importantly, doing the analysis, trying to think it through. And everyone for your thoughts on, what we're going to try to do as we move forward in thinking about a final report. Please, I'd welcome people's thoughts about sort of my memo that I shared about sort of a, the next few months, about the possibility of public hearings, about a specific public hearing that, asks the question, what is the MCPD doing best? And how could that be made even better? Thoughts about having hearings in person. It is possible, perhaps, given quorum and Open Meeting Act matters, that maybe we could set up a formal subcommittee for purposes of a public hearing, so we don't need to have 6 members present, but maybe a smaller number that would allow it to be an official meeting for purposes of hearing from the public. That's a possibility. And so I'd welcome, again, your reactions if you want to, send them to me regarding sort of my ideas for a possible agenda for the next 6 months. Anything else that people want to share before we get a motion to adjourn?
Good job, Eric.
Robin, thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Christie
Second.
motions, Ty seconds.
Second.
Raise your hand if you're voting to adjourn. Motion carries. Thank you all very much. Captain Statinsky, thank you so much for joining us while you're driving. Sergeant Brewer, thank you very
No
much.
problem.
Ruhama, thank you for being able to join us this evening, right after work. And of course, Logan and Susan, thank you very much for all of your help in preparation in the background. And Heidi Rhodes, thank you very, very much for your support and participation. Good night, everyone. Enjoy the
Night.
rest of this month. We'll be in touch.
Thanks.